Guten Tag. This is episode 3. We're talking about Azure Event Hubs. My name's Clemens, and this is Subscribe. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Continuing the first few episodes, foundations, introductions to the things that we build. Today, Azure Event Hubs, the service that actually takes most traffic in our platform. Azure Event Hubs doing tens of trillions of transactions per day. I still can't understand what that number looks like. But let's talk about what it is. It's a platform as a service event stream broker. You can use the Apache Kafka API if you want to. We also have AMQP, we also have HTTP, so it's your choice. Our SDKs, any Kafka SDK, any Kafka integration that you have, you can go and use those, all with Event Hubs, both sending and receiving with all the capabilities that exist. It's fully managed. You don't have to think about clusters or CPU and any of these things. We just manage that for you. We give you capacity. And you don't worry about storage, and none of that management is something you have to do. I said standards compliant polyglot SDKs with all the languages that you usually are familiar with, and because we use standards, any of the work that has been done for Kafka, for AMQP, for HTTP can be leveraged here. And it's very fast, industry-leading reliability and availability. There's many companies which are trusting Event Hubs. It's a complicated list. Sharing those slides in the notes. But if you compare the two, they look very much the same, but they have very different architectures. And we're not using the Apache Kafka code. We actually build our own system, and we are, implementing the same RPC protocol that Apache Kafka has. There's several different SKUs, product variants and pricing. There's standard, uses a shared resources model. That's why it's so cheap. We blend the capacity and consumption from many customers kind of into one big pool. And then we gate how many messages you can send. These are the throughput units. That you can go and then effectively buy yourself a throttle allowance into a shared cluster. In Event Hubs Premium, any of the side effects of that shared resources model, for instance, a noisy neighbor, etc., goes away because we've been isolating CPU or isolating memory just for you, even though it's all in a shared cluster, which means that brings the prices down. We're still running that completely isolated for you. And then it's dedicated if you have a very large workload like a gigabyte per second or 4 gigabytes per second, then you can go and bring dedicated resources. It kind of starts becoming interesting from 100 megabytes per second sustained workload on up. So then we're effectively running a full cluster for you and manage that for you. An Event Hub namespace is effectively a virtual broker that we built inside of the system. You get your own networking endpoints effectively, and then we run that inside of the system. You create your own event hubs, topics in Kafka parlance, your consumption groups, and you can then go and access them as if you had a computer with topics on them. This is all virtualized and then manageable through Azure Resource Manager. An event hub per se is a log with many partitions. Really, the focus is on the partition, and the event hub is a bracket around those partitions. You have producers which are sending a protocol of their choosing, a set AMQP, Kafka RPC, or HTTP, and then they go and send either directly to the partition. There's an API for this. They can go and send to a partition key. And then we hash that partition key and consistently send that to a partition, or you can send without any of that, and then we're going to go and pick a partition for you. But if you want to have order, you usually want to go and send to a particular partition. A log partition is a triple replicated structure. We always run all the event hubs zone replicated, which means if a data center a region usually has multiple zones, we run over 3 zones, isolated facilities. Your cluster is always distributed across those, and then each log is kind of triple replicated. And before we act anything back, we make sure that the message that you sent is actually replicated. And then we have further capabilities that are new, geo-replication, and they will allow to go and replicate that data synchronously or asynchronously, even into a second region. So there's, even if the first region goes down completely, you don't lose that data. A consumer group is effectively a view onto these partitions, allows multiple consumers to go and consume from these logs in a coordinated fashion. Each of these consumer groups can be, this is why they're groups, can have multiple receivers, and they are guaranteed that only one of those consumers gets access to a partition and pulling the data off. It's not a queue, it's a log. So you start reading from a certain point, the beginning of time or the end of time or some special time in the middle. And then once you've done that, then you can go and start pulling the data out. You can also go back in time. So as long as we retain data, which is between an hour and up to 90 days in premium and in dedicated, you can go and store the data. But it's not a database, right? It is organized by primary key time. And the older data gets, the more indexing you need. So generally, it's the best idea to go and take the data, use Event Hubs as a ultra reliable buffer, but then kind of move that data off into a place where you have better indexing. Another feature, almost another kind of service is Event Hubs Capture. Same front, so the same way how you get the data in, but the way how you get the data out is through the Event Hubs Capture engine. Is something that's a checkbox feature you can turn on, and what that will do is going to read automatically all the events that are coming in at the rate that they're coming in, and will go and write blobs into a storage account. And so that allows you to create a archive of all of your events, but also is possible to go and write those events into a storage account, and then from there drive batch processing. And some customers are doing this, so they are loading this into the blobs. As the blob gets closed, there's an event grid event is being raised, and then you can go and do batch-like processing on that data. Those are written into Avro archives. We don't do Avro encoding on the data. The data is whatever the data is. We don't touch that. But somehow we need to go and apply some structure around this. So we've chosen Apache Avro, so you can go and take an Apache Avro library. The schema is kind of always prepended, so this is an Avro container, and then crack it open, and then you have all the events at your disposal. Event Hubs is not a publish subscribe broker. Partitions are not subscriptions. If you have that, then you should use Service Bus and Event Grid. We're talking about this in the next episodes. Not a queue broker, not a discrete distribution engine, not a database, as I said. So it's a fast engine to move data very fast. It's a fast buffer that does all the things that you can also do with Kafka. We have, as I said, polyglots SDK support, .NET, Java, Java Spring Boot, Python, JavaScript, TypeScript, and Go. And of course, you can also use all the Kafka libraries that exist without any constraints these days. So we have all the features that Kafka has also implemented on Event Hubs. Geo-replication, as I said, that's something that's a new feature. You can go and turn on for premium and dedicated. You can go and turn on a second region. And when you turn on a second region, then we automatically go and move all the metadata and the data across to that second region, so that you have a second copy of that data. And if the primary region should be completely eliminated for whatever reason, you always have the secondary. You can do this in an asynchronous way, which means we write a bunch of events and then we replicate them over kind of in the background. Or you can even do it synchronously, where we write the event, and then only then acknowledge back to you. That gives you effectively an RPO 0. That is a little bit slower, of course, but some customers really want that. networking features is effectively a firewall in front of it. We have this all virtualized, and then you have kind of AMQP, HTTPS, Kafka kind of running through into that networking infrastructure. If you have a private endpoint, then that private endpoint is shielded effectively from the public internet. We have a private, effectively IPv6 endpoint kind of on these clusters. And when you bring your own connection, your own private network connection from inside of Azure, we kind of map that to that private endpoint. So it's literally not exposed. Your endpoint is not exposed to the internet. And that then maps to, and only that maps then to the resources. So even though this is a multi-tenant cluster, that private endpoint then maps to your resources, right? This is in premium. So your CPU, your memory, your processes that run your stuff. So fairly sophisticated network capabilities that are in here. And that's already kind of a quick overview of what Event Hub is and what you use it for. Of course, we're going to do deep dives into further capabilities in future episodes, but that's what I had for the moment. Thank you for tuning in.